a threesome lead to the end of my first marriage. My new fiance doesn't know the whole story. How do I tell him? I got married to my high school boyfriend young. I was only 22 at the time. I would have liked to have waited longer, but I got pregnant, so we got married. My ex was my first boyfriend, first kiss, first sex, first everything, and I was the same for him. So, about 3 years into our marriage, my husband, now ex, began to hint about spicing up our sex life as it had become rather dull. He suggested a threesome, and I assumed he meant with another girl. I declined because I'm really not into girls, but what he actually had in mind was another guy. Turns out one of his secret kinks was watching me with another man. I again declined, said I wasn't interested, but he was persistent, and eventually wore me down. If I'm being honest, I was a little curious, having only been with one guy my whole life. So I agreed that we found a guy online and set the whole thing up. I won't go into details on the whole event, but I had the best sex of my life that night. My ex seemed to enjoy himself as well, and meeting up with this guy, we will call him Tim, became a regular occurrence. Things were good for a while, but turned bad in a hurry. My ex grew jealous of Tim, and I began to question our relationship. Eventually, my ex told me that we were done seeing Tim, and when I said I didn't want to, that was the beginning of the end for us. We tried to make it work for the sake of our daughter, but we were broken at the point. We got divorced, and I ended up dating Tim for a while, but that ended when I realized we really weren't compatible outside of the bedroom. Fast forward 3 years, and I am engaged. We will call my fiance Alex, and I haven't told him exactly what led to my divorce. He knows I left my husband for another man, but I left out the rest of it. I'm ashamed of the whole thing and really don't want Alex to see me that way. I really love my fiance. I don't think I knew what real love was until I met him, but I'm terrified of what he will think of me if he knows all of my past. I'm also not 100% certain my ex won't let any of this slip out. The divorce wasn't smooth, and there have been many fights over custody. My ex is also pretty jealous of Alex as well. My ex has photos and video of me and Tim, and I'm not sure he's above sending it to Alex. He hasn't yet, but he has threatened it when we fight. I'm in a bind and need some advice. So I told my fiance last night. Overall, he took it well, but he did have a lot of uncomfortable questions that I really didn't want to answer. But I decided that I was done lying and hiding the truth. So I answered everything honestly. Alex had never really pressed me for a lot detail on what happened with my ex. I told him that I fell for another man I met and realized there was something wrong in my marriage. I told Alex that it was a mistake, and I was ashamed of how I behaved, and he just left it at that. So now he wanted the whole story and every detail. Alex was mostly interested in what I was thinking throughout the entire ordeal. He wanted to know what made me choose Tim and why he was the only one I ever slept with. The answer to that was that I wanted it to be just one guy at a time for safety. We both talked with Tim for a little while before we decided to go with him. We also ran a background check just to be certain the guy wasn't a felon. As for why I chose Tim, I didn't lie and said it was purely physical attraction. Tim was tall and fit, just a great body from top to bottom. He asked, "What about Tim made our time together so good?" I told him that it was really the taboo and the thrill that made it as good as I thought it was. I only learned that after I started dating Tim. The sex was still really good after we started officially dating, but it wasn't the mind blowing experience it was initially. Alex asked if I was completely over Tim and if we still had any contact. Me and Tim haven't spoken in 2 years. After we broke up, we continued to have sex every now and then. But when I met Alex, I stopped it. Tim would text me early in our relationship, inviting me over for sex, which I always declined. I blocked him after he sent me a pic of his, you know what, one night while I was sitting next to Alex. We haven't had any contact since. Alex asked if my feelings changed for my ex because I had better sex with Tim, but that wasn't the case. The sex was bad with my ex because I was no longer attracted to him. I'm not sure I was ever very attracted to him, actually. I was 15 when we met. He was older and gave me tons of compliments, told me how pretty I was. So we started dating, and I liked having a boyfriend, so we stayed together. I eventually got pregnant, so we got married. Tim just made me realize that I wasn't very attracted to my ex. And I ultimately agreed to stop seeing Tim while we went to counseling. But my ex just couldn't get over that I wanted to keep seeing him. I admitted that I never really had good sex and was initially resistant to giving it up. I am ashamed of that. But agreeing to stop immediately wouldn't have saved our marriage. My ex was very jealous by that point, obsessed really, and we were already fighting a lot. The marriage was dead from the first time I had sex with another man. Probably before, but definitely then. The whole ordeal really did destroy my ex, and I feel terrible about that. My ex initially wanted full custody of my daughter, but we settled on shared custody. But he eventually just stopped picking our daughter up. He became unstable, and I now have full custody. My ex doesn't see our daughter very much anymore. It's really sad, and although he isn't blameless in all this, it is mostly my fault. I'm not that person anymore, and I truly am ashamed of how I behaved. Finally, Alex asked if I was satisfied with our sex life, and if in the future, if things grew stale, would I want someone else? I told him that I am more than satisfied with our sex life. I'm obsessed with Alex and insanely attracted to him. Now I'm sure at some point when we get older, our sex life may get a little stale, but there are ways to spice up your sex life without having sex with another guy. My experience with that has permanently soured me on that type of thing. Alex did have a problem with my ex having the videos of me and Tim, but he doesn't know what to do about it. He also has no desire to see them, so I'm relieved about that too. So we are okay, and I just want to tell anyone that is considering something like this with their partner to really think it through before you got through with it. I learned that the hard way.